It's not going to come
but
out.
we cannot, I say this all the time, you know, when you roll around with pigs, you both get dirty, but the pigs likes it, right? But we cannot drag ourselves down to that level of depravity. And all I want...
We're not.
I believe that the American public, when you have soldiers who go to battle, who die, deserve truth and honesty and accountability. And that's all I want. And I'm just saying that from my perspective, one that's naive, country boy from South Carolina, right? I don't believe Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump to be honest because they can't tell you the truth about...
This wasn't just another political debate. This was a moment that stopped people in their tracks. Last night on CNN, Scott Jennings, one of Trump's most loyal defenders, walked straight into a conversation he simply couldn't control. The topic? The reported killing of over 160 school children. And from the very first second, you could feel it. This wasn't going to be spinnable. Because here's the detail that changes everything. Reports point to a Tomahawk missile, not a rumor, not speculation floating around online. A Tomahawk. A weapon system tightly associated with the United States. And instead of confronting that head-on, what did we get? Deflection, evasion, talking points that sounded like they were falling apart in real time. You had people bending over backwards trying to explain the unexplainable, trying to create doubt where the questions are already loud and clear. And the more they talked, the worse it sounded. Because this isn't just about politics anymore. When children are involved, when numbers like that are being reported, people expect seriousness. They expect honesty, not word games. But what we saw instead was something else entirely. A refusal to even entertain the possibility that something went terribly wrong. And here's why this moment matters. Because it fits a pattern. Time and time again, when difficult stories break, especially ones involving vulnerable people, there are voices that don't ask hard questions. They shut them down. Even now, you've got narratives floating around that raise more confusion than clarity. Claims that don't quite add up. Explanations that seem designed to buy time rather than tell the truth. And the world is watching, not just Americans, everyone. Because moments like this don't just disappear. They shape perception, they shape trust, and they raise a simple question people everywhere are starting to ask. What's really going on here? Now watch what happens next. Because when this discussion heats up, things go from uncomfortable to downright revealing. Like the video and subscribe right now. I've got some strong thoughts on this exchange. Let's take a closer look at this clip.
Right, more evidence that the U.S. was likely behind the strike on that school in Iran. Iranian media says that it killed at least 168 children and 14 teachers. This video shows what experts say is a U.S. Tomahawk missile striking an Iranian Navy base right next to that school. The same day, the school was struck. This weekend, President Trump insisted it was Iran who attacked the school. And today, he appeared to somewhat back off that claim, but he still suggested that it could have been Iran.
I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries, you know that. Whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic. It's sold to other countries. But that's being investigated right now.
You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
But experts tell CNN the Tomahawk missiles are not generic. And while other countries like the United Kingdom and Australia do possess them, Iran does not. But Pete Hegseth is striking also a very different tone from the president on this story. Listen.
Well, we're still investigating, and that's where I'll leave it today. But what I will emphasize to you and to the world is that unlike our adversaries, the Iranians, we never target civilians.
There was a report late in the week from two officials that it was likely U.S. involvement. Is that report false?
I've already said we're investigating.
If you could tell the American public it definitively was not us, you would tell us, wouldn't you?
I would say that it's being investigated, which is the only answer I'm prepared to give.
It is a question whether they would tell us, because the president acknowledged in his comments today that he didn't know what happened. I have questions about why that is at this stage. But also, then he spins this whole false narrative about it could have been anyone, including the Iranians, because everybody has Tomahawks, when that's very much not true. I mean, if you're anyone listening to that, how can you believe that they are interested in getting to the truthful answer here.
Well, I will not agree with Pete Hegseth that often, but I think he did give the right response in that interview that this is under investigation. It does have to be looked at. And because when something goes under investigation, especially by the Department of Defense, you have to let the investigation play out, even if there is definitive video. And I think that is important that he acknowledged that. I will say that when I was at the Department of Defense under Secretary Austin, we had a center of excellence that mitigated civilian harm. That was an office that was basically been completely gutted by Secretary Hegseth by I think like 90%. But these were civilians embedded with combatant commands, such as CENTCOM, that would launch strikes and be part of their targeting process. So I'm not saying that is why this strike happened. I think there has to be an investigation.
Why is Trump misleading about it? Because he is misleading about it.
But but I hear you. Lloyd Austin was former Commander General of CENTCOM, 4-star General, Pete Hegseth, Fox News host.
Yes, very different resumes.
Very different resumes.
Decorated military.
Very different resumes.
Decorated
there
military.
is no one.
Can you not acknowledge that the man served?
The man served. Yes, the man served. He
highly decorated.
Not in combat.
Not in combat.
Hegseth?
He wasn't in combat.
Iraq and Afghanistan.
I mean, the man served our country.
And he, I think, had a Bronze Star for his
But
service.
my point that I want to get back to.
And then, it somehow gets even more revealing. Just look at Scott Jennings in that moment. You can actually see it happening in real time. The confidence starts to crack. The usual talking points, they're not landing. The smooth defense, gone. What you're left with is someone scrambling to protect a narrative that's falling apart on live television. And that's what makes it so uncomfortable to watch. Because this isn't analysis anymore. It's blind loyalty colliding with reality. Scott has built a reputation on defending Trump and his inner circle no matter what. But here, when the pressure is on and the questions actually matter, he looks completely unprepared. It's like watching someone realize mid-sentence that the argument they came in with doesn't actually make sense, but they have to keep going anyway. And then comes the predictable fallback. He served. That's the shield. That's the entire defense. As if that alone settles everything. As if that automatically means competence, honesty, and good decision-making. But people aren't buying that anymore. Because leadership, especially in moments involving war and international consequences, is about more than a line on a resume. It's about clarity under pressure. It's about telling the truth when it's inconvenient. And most importantly, it's about actually knowing what you're doing when the stakes couldn't be higher. But instead of that, what people are seeing is something very different. They're seeing confusion, mixed messaging, deflection, and defenders who can't even clearly explain the decisions they're standing behind. And that's where the frustration really comes from. Because this isn't a game, it's not a movie, it's not branding or tough-sounding operation names designed to look impressive on headlines. This is real life, with real consequences, and yet the people defending it sometimes sound like they're reciting lines rather than explaining strategy. That disconnect? People feel it. It's why moments like this go viral. It's why viewers stop and rewind, because what you're watching isn't just a debate, it's a breakdown, a moment where the usual political script fails, and what's left behind is uncertainty. And in that CNN exchange, that uncertainty was on full display.
There is a level of competence that the American public is thirsting for that they are not getting from Pete Hegseth. And we're seeing that. When he is up there...
Transparency.
Transparency, that's all we want. We're talking about 160 children that were killed. All we want is an honest answer that comes from you and the President of the United States. This isn't politics. This isn't Lindsey Graham versus Cory Booker. This is just tell us what we're doing, because we have 7 soldiers, as Abby corrected me last segment. We have 7 soldiers who've died. We have 160 children who've died. We understand that this is the fog of war. However, we want a level of competence from Pete Hegseth that we're not getting.
I do think that we are
What
going
is
to
incompetent
know.
about this military operation, in your opinion, in your expert opinion?
I don't. First of all, I never served, and let me
You're
start
quick
by
to say
saying
this
that.
is incompetent.
No,
I want to know
no,
what's
no,
incompetent.
No. I think Pete Hegseth is incompetent.
Why?
I think
What's happening?
Because he has an inability to tell the truth.
What did he say? What did he say that was false?
Because we know what happened.
No, we don't. They're investigating.
Well, I mean, look, there is.
Wait a minute, whoa.
No. Hold on.
I want all of you all to go out on a limb right now and tell me that the United States, even during the fog of war, did not kill those kids. Tell me they didn't.
I don't know. They're investigating it, and I'm willing to abide by the results.
I do think
that's the right answer.
It is fine and important for there to be an investigation. I actually think Major Garrett's last question might have been the most important. which is, if the investigation does find that we are responsible,
would you ever know?
Would you tell us?
I think,
because I think that's what, to me, when I think about the United States military and how we act on the world stage, that is one of the main things that makes us different.
Right. And I think that right now we have to assume, and I'm going to assume, that the U.S. military, because the level that these investigations are handled is like nowhere near any political thing. My thing, I believe that the U.S. military will conduct a very fair and thorough investigation, and they will come up with the answer. I looked at the imagery myself. I think the answer is going to be that we did it, but I don't know, because I'm just looking at imagery, right?
But
just like the Americans are. But I mean,
I know they will do an investigation.
I think that it will come out. So if the military investigators come out with that as the answer, if they do not tell the truth at that moment, if they suppress that, we know we are in a completely different
I don't think anybody has. I don't think anybody has faith that Pete Hegseth will stand in front of a camera and say that we did this.
But mistakes will happen in war.
Did you call for the same transparency when Lloyd Austin was AWOL? He had his medical issues and was
he
not
wasn't
present.
AWOL. He had a medical issue.
And there was an investigation into that
and
that we released.
She was there.
I was there. I was there. We released not only that investigation. We released about the withdrawal. We released about Afghanistan and Iraq.
But we
released every single investigation, and he took full accountability and responsibility for that.
Did you agree with the president when the president, after all the Afghanistan investigations, judged it to be a raging success, President Biden?
Well, I didn't say that. I think he didn't say that.
But
he did not say it was a
he
raging
said it was
success.
He said it was a big
no,
success.
and he actually expressed the solemnity of the moment of the withdrawal
and all the failures that went into that.
But the commander in chief still thinks
that
it
was
great.
done, and that was
I do not think he came out when the deaths of service members were there. When we had deaths of service members,
He checked his watch at the remains transfer, didn't he?
I mean,
first of all, Donald Trump literally was talking about ballrooms after 6 soldiers died and wore a hat.
I think the most.
And this is where the narrative completely falls apart. Because while people on TV are trying to sell this as some kind of success, reality is telling a very different story, and it's a lot harder to spin. Think about the contrast for a second. On one hand, you have officials and commentators using confident language, trying to frame everything as under control, on track, even effective. But on the other hand, you have reports of escalating conflict, rising casualties, and a situation that looks anything but stable. So when someone like Scott Jennings calls this a success, people naturally stop and ask, based on what, exactly? Because success in a conflict like this isn't about sounding strong on television. It's about outcomes. It's about stability. It's about whether the situation is improving or spiraling. And right now, what people are seeing feels a lot closer to escalation than resolution. That's why this moment hits such a nerve. There's a growing disconnect between the messaging and what's actually unfolding. And when that gap gets too wide, it starts to erode trust. Fast. But there's another layer to this that's even more uncomfortable. A lot of critics are starting to question the motivations behind the timing, the messaging, and the urgency of this conflict. They're asking whether this is purely about national security, or whether political incentives are shaping the way this is being handled and presented. Because let's be honest, in today's media environment, attention is everything. And when a major international conflict suddenly dominates headlines, it inevitably shifts focus away from everything else. That's not speculation, that's just how the news cycle works. So naturally, people begin connecting dots. They look at what was being discussed before, what's being discussed now, and they start asking questions. Fair or not, those questions aren't going away. And what makes it even more striking is how quickly some of the loudest voices have shifted. Issues that once dominated political conversations, demanding answers, demanding accountability, suddenly fade into the background when they become inconvenient. That kind of selective outrage doesn't go unnoticed. Because at the end of the day, people don't expect perfection from leaders, but they do expect consistency, they expect honesty, and they expect that when serious decisions are made, especially ones involving conflict, they're grounded in clear reasoning, not confusion or contradiction. Right now, a lot of Americans aren't seeing that clarity. Instead, they're seeing mixed signals, shifting explanations, and a level of uncertainty that doesn't match the confidence being projected on TV. And that's why calling this a success feels so out of touch to so many people watching. Because when the messaging and reality don't line up, no amount of repetition can make it believable.
and all Americans need to know and understand this. The difference between us and the enemy, we do not target civilians. When it happens, and it will happen in war, it is tragic and it is not meant to be. The enemy targets civilians. They hide behind civilians. They fund people who set up bases in hospitals so that civilians are in the way. That's not what we do. An investigation needs to occur. All the truth needs to be told. And we will give transparency to the American people. But there's two parts of this war, our part and the enemy. The enemy targets civilians. Look what they're doing all over the region,
but
firing
the story
missiles
doesn't end there, Scott. The story is not just we don't target civilians. It is also that when mistakes happen on the battlefield, we take accountability for them.
Correct.
That's the important part.
Nobody has faith. Nobody has faith that this American.
You're presuming a lot.
Well, no. I mean,
investigation is not over.
Well, listen.
Yes.
I started by asking the basic question: why is the president of the United States misleading about some basic information about who has Tomahawk missiles and who doesn't? Answer that.
Abby, I think the investigation is still going on. I don't know why he said people have other countries.
And then why is he saying, as if it is fact,
so why
when
are you
the
assuming they're not going to
investigation?
be honest with the American people?
Okay, so why is he stating, as if it is fact, when the investigation hasn't been completed, that Iran was responsible?
Look, what we do know.
That's why I'm asking these questions, because the president is
Scott's
making
point,
false
what we
statements
do
about
know-
something that is awful.
Yeah, and it's tragic. It's tragic, period. It's an absolute tragedy.
Yes.
We also know that Iran funded people who raped and killed young girls in Israel.
Trust me, I understand that fully. And there is no equivalency between Iran's malignance on the world stage and this. And in fact, it is the opposite of an equivalency. It's actually an insistence on the United States upholding its own standards.
Just have a higher standard.
That's what it is. And listen,
we cannot. I say this all the time. You know, when you roll around with pigs, you both get dirty, but the pigs likes it, right? But we cannot drag ourselves down to that level of depravity. And all I want,
We're not.
I believe that the American public, when you have soldiers who go to battle, who die, deserve truth and honesty and accountability. And that's all I want. And I'm just saying that from my perspective, one that's naive, country boy from South Carolina, right? I don't believe Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump to be honest, because they can't tell you the truth about simple things.
Can I just jump in on what Bakari's saying? Because I take your point on the honesty and transparency into what Abby's saying. It's like, why did the president lie about this? It's so blatant. Like, if Iran had Raytheon technology, that would be a huge problem. I do think that we have to acknowledge here, Raytheon makes the Tomahawks, so I think we have to acknowledge here that Congress has a role to play, and Congress, to the questions about the Secretary's health, the questions about the Afghanistan withdrawal, they also have an oversight committee that can conduct an investigation and can demand records from the department that we also supplied during that time. So I think Congress has a voice.
Laura Ingraham, I think, has been sending a few messages about this directly to the administration, not only saying that there needs to be accountability, it has to be addressed publicly, but also saying that the investigation needs to be wrapped up quickly and addressed head on. I think speed is actually important here, because if you wait for the news outlets to do their sort of layman's investigation, you can at least say I know there's going to be a full picture of this in great detail.
I think she's right.
But the administration could say more than they're saying now, and they could tell the president to stop misleading. That's the other thing that they can do.
Part of that is that, the president is not on message because someone didn't tell him what the message was. Right. I mean, I don't really, I'm guessing that he's not like willfully blaming Iran when he knows. I just feel like this whole thing is a lot of not really telling each other what they're supposed to say. This entire episode is filled. And not well informed. They could do a better job.
And this is where everything really starts to unravel. Because at some point, you have to stop spinning, stop defending, and just call it what it is. When the situation keeps getting worse, when the messaging keeps changing, when the facts don't line up, then maybe this wasn't strategy. Maybe it was a mistake. Look at what we're being told. One moment, it's everything is under control. The next, it's the war is almost over. But then you look at what's actually happening, and it tells a completely different story. Military assets are being repositioned, more firepower is being deployed, operations are expanding, not shrinking. That's not how wars wind down, that's how they ramp up. And people can see that, because you can't claim things are wrapping up while simultaneously escalating. That contradiction alone raises serious questions about what's really going on behind the scenes. Then you start hearing mixed signals from within the administration itself. Different explanations, different tones, no clear, unified message. And in a situation this serious, that's not just confusing, it's alarming. Because if the people in charge aren't aligned, then what exactly is the plan? And then there's the cost. Billions being spent in a matter of days. Resources pouring into a conflict that still doesn't have a clearly defined objective, at least not one being communicated to the public. So naturally, people start asking, what are we actually trying to achieve here? How does this end? And why does it feel like the explanation keeps shifting? That's where frustration turns into concern. Because when past statements don't match present actions, credibility takes a hit. And when credibility drops, trust follows right behind it. So now we're left with a situation where the narrative says one thing, but reality seems to be telling another story entirely. And that gap is getting harder and harder to ignore. If you made it this far, make sure you like the video and subscribe, because we're going to keep breaking moments like this down in a way most channels won't. But here's the real question. Do you think this is actually a strategy playing out? Or are we watching a situation spiral out of control in real time?